Manchester United wasn't just a club, it was English football's gold standard. But the moment American ownership took control, everything changed. What followed wasn't just bad management, it was greed. This is the story of how the Glazers turned a global football empire into a shell of its former self, and why fans across the world are still fighting to get their club back. Stay with us as we uncover the ugly truth of the Glazers at Manchester United. Before they ever stepped into Old Trafford, the Glazers were already known for mixing sports with business. Based in Florida, the family built their fortune through real estate, shopping centers, and media deals. But their real entrance into the sporting world came in 1995 when patriarch Malcolm Glazer purchased the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Under Glazer ownership, the Buccaneers went on to win 2 Super Bowls, but while that success grabbed headlines, it was how the Glazers ran things behind the scenes that really defined them. Tight financial control, minimal transparency, and a clear focus on profits over passion. They weren't sportsmen, they were businessmen through and through. So when Malcolm Glazer began buying shares in Manchester United in the early 2000s, fans were already uneasy. This wasn't just an outsider, it was someone who saw the club as a financial asset, not a community pillar. By 2005, the Glazers had taken full control of Manchester United. But they didn't pay for it the way most owners would. No, their method was far more calculated and far more detrimental to the club, to the point that this type of takeover has effectively been banned by the Premier League. When the Glazers took full control of Manchester United in 2005, they didn't pay for the club with family wealth or external investors. Instead, they executed a move straight out of Wall Street, a leveraged buyout. Here's what that means in simple terms. They borrowed hundreds of millions of pounds to buy the club, and then passed the debt to the Manchester United itself. The club became responsible for repaying the loans used to purchase it. The Glazers risked almost nothing. United risked everything. Before their arrival, Manchester United was a debt-free powerhouse, consistently successful on the pitch and financially stable off it. But the moment the Glazers took over, that changed overnight. The club was suddenly saddled with a mountain of debt exceeding £500 million, and that number only grew. At its peak, United's debt climbed to over £700 million. The interest payments alone were staggering tens of millions of pounds every single year. Money that could have gone toward transfers, stadium renovations, and youth development. Instead, it vanished into a financial black hole. And while United bled cash, the Glazers protected their own interests. This wasn't football ownership, it was financial exploitation. Yet, despite all this, Manchester United didn't immediately fall apart. In fact, they continued winning for several years after the takeover. So, what kept the club afloat in the early years of Glazer ownership? 2 men, 2 pillars. If the Glazer takeover didn't lead to an immediate collapse, it was because Manchester United still had 2 towering figures holding the football side together: Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill. Sir Alex was more than just a manager. He was an institution, a master motivator, a relentless winner, and someone who commanded the respect of everyone. Alongside him was David Gill, United's long-serving chief executive, who ensured the club was run with stability, structure, and a clear vision. Together, they formed a shield that protected Manchester United from the chaos brewing behind the scenes. Despite the growing debt and rising interest payments, Ferguson kept United competing at the highest level. Premier League titles, Champions League finals, and domestic dominance, all while operating with a net spend far lower than rival clubs. He squeezed every drop of potential out of his squads, winning not just matches, but time. Time that shielded fans from seeing the rot beginning to settle in. Gill, meanwhile, helped manage the business side with discipline. He expanded United's global sponsorship portfolio, laying the foundation for the commercial powerhouse it has become today. He ensured the club didn't spiral out of control financially, even under the burden of the Glazers' debt. Even on the football side of things, his impact was massive. helping United recruit and retain the likes of Wayne Rooney, Cristiano Ronaldo, Nemanja Vidic, and Robin van Persie, to name a few. The duo knew how to make things work, despite ownership, not because of it. Even after selling Ronaldo for a then record fee in 2009, they still made it work after only signing Antonio Valencia, Michael Owen, and Gabriel Obertan as replacements. Under the tandem of David Gill and Sir Alex Ferguson, the values of the club withstood, regardless of the change in ownership. Everyone knew who was in charge, and there was a clear football authority. But then in 2013, everything changed. If you're enjoying the video so far, please hit that like button. When Sir Alex and David Gill walked away in 2013, they didn't just leave behind titles and trophies, they left behind order. And in their absence, chaos stepped in. The Glazers handed the keys to Ed Woodward, a former investment banker who had helped structure their original takeover. But while Woodward may have understood finance, he had no experience in football, and it showed. His sole focus seemed to be the commercial side of things, best seen when he said, "Playing performance doesn't really have a meaningful impact on what we can do on the commercial side of the business." The brand Manchester United was world-class of the pitch as Woodward secured deals with noodle companies in Japan, tractor companies in India, Kohler from USA, and Melbourne Airport of Australia, just to name a few. Ed Woodward was succeeding at growing the Manchester United brand, which was to the delight of the Glazers. The Glazers continued taking dividends, millions of pounds withdrawn every year, even while the club spiraled further into mediocrity. Manchester United became one of the only elite clubs in Europe that regularly paid its owners dividends. Clubs like Liverpool, Manchester City, Real Madrid, and Barcelona were reinvesting in infrastructure, scouting, and analytics. United? They were bleeding cash straight into the Glazers' pockets. The club had now spent more than £1 billion servicing debt, paying interest, bank fees, and handing out dividends since the Glazers arrived. And that wasn't the only billion spent. In his reign, Woodward saw over $1 billion spent on transfer. But did his approach result in success? No. Manchester United became something it had never been before. A brand-first football club. Transfers weren't just about performance, they were about marketing impact, social media impressions, and commercial reach. Players were looked at like commercial assets used to sell more shirts, increase online presence, and be used for advertisements. Angel Di Maria was paraded like a Galactico and sold within a year for a loss. Alexis Sanchez arrived with a piano, but left with one of the worst wage-to-impact ratios in Premier League history. Paul Pogba was signed for a record fee and left for free. Harry Maguire became the world's most expensive defender in the face of many memes. Jadon Sancho cost over £70 million and failed to make an impact. Antony, who could have been bought for half the price, is another £85 million gamble that still hasn't paid off. While he was terrible at the business of buying players, overpaying, and targeting the wrong profiles, he was equally as bad at selling players. The only player he sold for any notable profit during his tenure was Dan James, bought from Swansea and then sold to Leeds for a £10 million profit. Under Ed Woodward, United incurred close to £150 million in transfer losses. Being bad at transfers is one thing, but Woodward was also handing out ridiculous contracts. Alexis Sanchez was given a £500,000 a week, Casemiro $350,000. Marcus Rashford was renewed for $325,000, and Jadon Sancho was given $250,000. Players were given contracts they had not earned, making it nearly impossible to move them on. For someone meant to be business savvy, he threw away millions. His appointment of managers was no better. One year it was Van Gaal's philosophy, the next Mourinho's pragmatism, then Solskjaer's sentimentality, then Ten Hag's rebuild. Each era came with a flurry of signings, hundreds of millions spent, countless players bought, and somehow the team got worse. No long-term plan, no continuity, just confusion. But then, a bombshell announcement was made. After the debacle of the Super League and subsequent resignation of Ed Woodward, it was known that the Glazer were looking for more money. So, in November 2022, they announced their openness to exploring strategic alternatives for the club, including the possibility of selling either a partial stake or the entire organization. This had fans all over the world rejoicing as the possibility of the Glazers leaving their beloved club looked like a reality. With a £6 billion valuation set, fans waited to see who would come to save their club. There was rumored Qatari interest that wanted to take full control of the club and promised to wipe out all the debt, but that never came to fruition. Then there was Manchester-born Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos. Initially, he targeted a full purchase as well, before settling on a minority stake and gaining full control of the football side of things. Are the Glazers the worst football owners? Let us know down below. And to find out more about Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe at Manchester United, watch The Ugly Truth of Ineos at Manchester United next.